Welcome to TypeScript FM, the friendly podcast for TypeScript developers where we bring you news, updates, and interviews from the community with plenty of tomfoolery sprinkled in. I'm your host, Kamran Ayub, and I'm joined by my co-host and best bud, Eric Onerheim. Together, we're the two TypeScript fools. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. How's it going, Kamran?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I've been running a lot lately. I've ran every day for the last 6 days.
Ooh, that's fun. Even in the rain?
Yep, even in the rain. But it's been like a tiny bit of rain when I've been running.
Yeah.
It hasn't been that cold. It hasn't been that cold.
Yep. That's good. That's fun.
Yeah.
So you feel your ankle and stuff is feeling a lot better?
Yeah, I'm injury free currently. I'm just like getting my fitness back. I threw down 5 miles yesterday, which was great. It felt good. It was like a good 5 miles. It was like a strong 5 miles.
Nice.
And my beats per minute were like 10 on average less than the last time I ran 5 miles. So I'm like, yeah, fitness is coming back. So that's good.
Nice.
I was totally gassed today though. I didn't make it. I barely made it 3 miles.
Oh, yeah. Hey, we didn't record yesterday because you had construction going on. Did you finally get those stairs?
It sounds like they might have just finished because they were still here today hammering, but they have stopped. So I can only assume that they are done. And I ran by them, surreptitiously to spy on them. And it looks pretty cool. We got new steps put in.
Beautiful.
And this is going to be great. So far, it looks stupendous. It's got that all-weather decking and metal railings, and it's attached to the house.
Beautiful.
And it's all permitted, and it's like all done correctly. And I'm like,
and to code.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's good.
They even submitted drawings to the city.
Well, good. Yeah. So they're doing it. They're doing it the right way. It's not like the folks that I hired to make the wall for my office downstairs in the basement. They did not talk to anybody. Nobody.
They just did it.
Yeah. But, so it goes.
Yeah. They're piercing the bureaucracy by not talking to it.
Yeah. Anyway, what you been working on?
Well, I've been working on my super secret console project to run Excalibur games on consoles. Very secret now that I'm talking about it. But I was trying to get it to run on Linux, and I was trying to get it to run on Linux in like the most unideal Linux situation because I'm running in like Hyperland and in Fedora, which is all Wayland. I got to a point where I don't know if I can run it without like X Wayland, which is like a compatibility layer where it still runs the X like old windowing thing. But I think I might be stuck. I might be stuck because I'm hitting a thing where Angle just does not want to show me the display with SDL3, and I'm pretty stuck. And I just basically spent all day Sunday doing something that didn't matter.
I don't know half of what you just said. You basically could have just been speaking in Elvish. So
Bish be posh.
Hopefully, door open, please, to the mines of Moria.
and then I got nerd sniped by performance, like completely separately in Excalibur. And then I spent the rest of my weekend doing like performance benchmark optimizations. And I really got a lot of speed.
Ooh.
So that's pretty cool. I also ran into a game rendering benchmark that had the wrong rendering code for Excalibur. So I sent them a PR and they merged it.
Nice.
So now in their benchmark, it shows like us running 10,000 items at 60 FPS on my machine. So
good.
I was very pleased.
You don't want to be misrepresented there.
No, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
I was very nice.
Good. Glad that worked out. Nothing's really different with me. I am just heads down on MCP course stuff. Although I will say, I was talking to you about this outside the show. I did dig a little deeper into dealing with sales tax when you're doing like a software as a service, because my product gets bought by people outside the US. So that's a thing that I have to deal with. And let me just say that it's not pleasant. So you want to get those ducks in a row before you decide to sell to people outside the US.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. We have a lot of news for the week of October 20th, 2025. There's at least like 4 big things to talk about. So should we just get into it?
Let's just get into it.
Yeah.
I think the headliner is there's a new Deno Deploy.
Brand new. Like,
Brand spanking new.
fresh off the press, rewritten from scratch. And apparently they've been working on this for a while. They've been sharing updates on social media, but this is the first time that I've seen the new Deno Deploy. And they have a great blog post on the blog that is titled My Highlights from the New Deno Deploy, and it's from Phil Hawksworth. And he goes into a lot of detail for all the different things that he likes. And, you know, he works there, but he really presented it in a great way for developers. So we can give you the too long didn't read, but I think you should go check it out, especially if you are interested in Deno Deploy. But one major thing is that they've got built-in CI/CD now. So before you had to build in like GitHub Actions or externally, and then you had to push to Deno Deploy. But now it works more like Cloudflare Workers or Netlify, where they just have built-in CI/CD. So that is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is super cool. And they also have automatic like preview builds, preview environments. So like if you're doing like PRs, you can get like preview builds and preview environments for whatever you're doing, which is pretty slick. The other thing that's really neat is they have an easy to migrate from KV to Postgres. So you can, KV is their persistent key value store.
Yeah, it's KV is like the easy way. Like if you just need to store some stuff, it's super easy to use. But what you couldn't do before was easily turn that into a full-fledged Postgres database, and now you can. So that's pretty cool. And then speaking of databases, they now have database environments. So this will allow you to automatically access the right database environment depending on which deployment environment you're in without any config. So if you're using the Deno APIs, it just automatically knows in this environment, you get access to the development database, staging database, production database, etc. You don't have to do any kind of like config dancing in your code, even at runtime, to like choose, oh, I'm going to use this key, or, you know, if development, then connect to this database. Nope, don't have to do it. They just take care of it for you, which I think is pretty sweet.
Yeah. And another really cool thing is they've added automatic open telemetry into your stuff. So you can just get traces just out of the box. Super slick. This is a thing that's like table stakes, in my opinion. Nothing is worse than digging through like old school logs to figure out what's wrong across your whole environment. Traces are just like, hey, click, let's look at the waterfall. Let's see all of the hops, the interprocess hops between different services. And you can just see it all in one place. So can recommend. We use this with, at work, we use this with Grafana, and you can see the traces in a nice waterfall. It's super nice.
Nice. One thing I really liked that he called out was the 404 reporting. And this is especially annoying in some tools where it doesn't distinguish between like actual errors and 404 errors, because I don't want to get alerts based on 404s, especially if someone is just hitting, random stuff. But what I do want is to know if a 404 is actually valid. And like, am I missing something? Like, is it a broken link? And they separate 404 errors from the rest of the errors, and they put it into a really nice report that says, hey, these pages got the most 404 hits or whatever. It's separate from other types of exceptions. Like, it's not an exception, it's just a URL not found error. So I do like that. Like, that's a pretty nice developer experience, quality of life.
For sure. They've also added environment variables and secrets.
And importantly, this works with both dynamic and static sites, right? Because you treat them differently. With static sites, you need them at build time, but with dynamic sites, you need them during server render time. And Deno's environment variables and secrets work both ways, depending on what you've selected as your deployment strategy. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. In their documentation, they say here they have a secret environment variable, which is never visible in the UI after creation, only readable from application code. So I guess it looks like an environment variable is what it's looking like here in their documentation.
Yeah, I think it's probably implemented as an environment variable, but in the management interface, it's a secret. Obviously, what they want you to do is to use a secret store, which I would recommend. But if you're just doing a little demo and you need to put something secret in there, this is kind of nice.
They have a new CLI for the Deno deploy, so you can just do Deno space deploy.
Yeah, I mean, it's implemented as a subcommand because there was actually an entirely separate CLI, Deno control, CTL, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now it's actually just built into Deno, the Deno command, which makes total sense.
You can also connect to environments with the -- tunnel. So this is kind of like, if you've ever done, what is it called?
ngrok?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. ngrok, same idea. So you can have like local environments connected to your environment in the cloud, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and then this is something that you'll like too. They introduced new playgrounds, which not only allow you to write like some Deno code and TypeScript code in the browser, but also press a button and have it deployed and shared with other people. You don't even need to go through any of the GUI or whatever to set up a Deno deploy project. It just works through the playground, which is super slick. And Phil has teased that there's some other improvements coming to playgrounds that are going to make it even more valuable, and even more useful to people. So I'm kind of excited about that.
Yeah, that's super cool. They even added this little cute deploy button that will go and spin up like a little GitHub template. It's super cool.
Yeah, it's quite cute. Awesome. Next big piece of news, Vitest 4 is out. Woohoo!
We love Vitest here in this house.
Yeah. So what we got here, browser mode is stable. With this release, we are removing the experimental tag from browser mode. To make it possible, we had to introduce some changes to the public API. So, there's some breaking changes, but now you can install separate packages for each of your providers. So if you're using Playwright, WebDriver, Browser Preview, so this makes it easier to work with custom options, and you'll like TypeScript users. You don't have to use / references anymore in your configs to reference those other packages.
One thing that's really cool in here is they added visual regression testing. So you can do things like to match screenshot, and you can do it by like area of the page, which is pretty nice. So you don't have to have the brittleness of an entire page. You can be like, this spot, I expect this spot to match this other spot. So one thing that you might have run into if you've ever done screenshot stuff is the bigger the screenshot, the more noise can sneak through if you have a lower threshold. So like, for example, if I have like 1,000 by 1,000 image and then I changed 1 pixel, well, then that's like 0.1% changed. But if I have a 1 by 1 image and that 1 pixel change, that's 100% change, right? So that's kind of like, you want to test the smallest amount of screen space that you can get away with. So this is great.
Yeah, I think for TypeScript developers, there's some more type-aware hooks. So in this example, what they're showing is that at the top of your test, you can use test.extend, and then you can go fetch to-dos, and then those to-dos will be provided as context to your before each and after each hooks, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, super slick.
Yep. They just introduced standard schema support, which unifies like a base schema matcher across Valibot, Archetype, and Zod. And now Vitest 4 has introduced a new asymmetric matcher called expect.schema matching, and it accepts a standard schema v1 object and validates values against it. So it passes the assertion when the value conforms to the schema. So that's pretty big news, and that's pretty sweet.
That is super cool, especially when you're doing like any kind of like maybe any kind of fuzzing, or you want to see like, oh, it could be anything in this shape. Like we want to match this shape. That's what we're testing.
Yep. And in their motivating example here in the blog post, they have imports from Zod, Valibot, and Archetype and are using them in the same exact test, doing the same exact test assertion. So that is super cool. So I think those are the big things. There are breaking changes, and so you definitely want to go view the migration guide before upgrading. But those are pretty exciting.
Well, not to be outdone, Nuxt 4.2 just dropped.
Whoa!
With experimental TypeScript plugin support and better error handling. And one thing that's really cool is they added abort control for data fetching. So now you don't have to wait until the request is done. You could now use abort control. So they have a motivating example here where you can pass the signal, the abort controller signal into the refresh, and you can cancel that request later. If, like, for example, if you're doing like a type ahead or something, you were doing it like a search. This would be an example of where you might add a abort controller.
Nice. So tell me more about that experimental TypeScript plugin support. It looks like it's not to develop new TypeScript plugins, but instead will actually bring in a bunch of TypeScript plugins that should improve your developer experience as a TypeScript developer.
That's right. And so what they have listed in their blog post here is they have smart component renaming. So they're taking advantage of like the references and stuff, like kind of this DX, like this tooling advantage.
Yeah.
They go to definition, which I don't know how people live without that, but go to definition for dynamic imports. So you can navigate directly to files using a glob pattern. So like import, assets name.webp, and you can, so they got that figured out. That's cool.
That's cool. Yep.
Nitro route navigation. So in Nuxt, you have I believe it's called Nitro routes, but I could be wrong about that. Future Eric will correct me if I'm wrong. But you can jump to server routes from the data fetching function. So, you have the air quotes front end functions, the $fetch, the use fetch, use lazy fetch. You can jump to the backend route or the server route, that's handling that.
Yeah, that's super helpful.
Yeah. They added some enhanced auto import support, and they have runtime config navigation. So you can go to definition seamlessly with runtime config properties, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, these are pretty sweet. It says that this feature also requires selecting the workspace TypeScript version in VS Code. So you have to use the workspace version of TypeScript, not the global VS Code installation of TypeScript.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they also noted that these are through the dxup/nuxt module. That's where these, the @dxup Nuxt module are where these are exposed.
Cool. We've mentioned the Vite environment API. And so they announced that you can now opt in to the Vite environment API. I'm just quoting from the blog post, but it says it closes the gap between development and production by allowing the Vite dev server to handle multiple environments concurrently rather than requiring multiple Vite dev servers as we've done previously in Nuxt. This should improve performance when developing and eliminating some edge case bugs. And it's the foundation for implementing Nitro as a Vite environment, which should speed up the dev server still further. So that's pretty cool. This is experimental, but you can enable that with the Vite environment API config option. Cool.
Awesome.
This Nitro server thing that we're talking about, it looks like that's their server-side integration, and they're also extracting it into its own package. So now it'll be at Nuxt Nitro Server. And this architectural change allows for different Nitro integration patterns and paves the way for future innovations in server-side rendering. So that's pretty cool. So there's no changes that are required for your code. It's just something that they're doing internally, but it's going to allow them to swap out server-side rendering, I expect. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then
Sweet.
Another DX improvement is they just added better error pages in development. So you get a nice little printout of what's wrong.
Cool. Sounds good. What else is next? The third announcement.
Next 16. What? More next?
Wait, did you just say Nuxt 16? No. Next 16. So Next.js Conf is coming up. And ahead of that, the team has just released Next.js 16. So just going through a few of these improvements here. We've got cache components. So this is using that partial pre-rendering technique, which we kind of covered in React 19, is something that's kind of brand new. So that is available. And then if you are using Next.js in like VS Code or some other IDE that supports MCP integration, they've just released the Next.js DevTools MCP, which is going to hopefully help you improve debugging and workflow. So you can just install that into your IDE if you'd like to. they've been working on middleware for a while, and now they are renaming it to Proxy, which they say makes the app's network boundary explicit. So Proxy, the proxy.ts file is the new middleware.ts file, and it runs on the Node.js runtime. And then the middleware TS file is still available for Edge runtime, but it's deprecated and it's going to be removed. So it looks like they're moving to this new proxy.ts file.
Nice. They added a whole bunch of logging improvements. It shows you how long things are taking, the compile and the render. That's super cool. So you can be like, oh, this took forever to compile, or oh, this took forever to render. That's pretty neat.
Yep. Other big news here: TurboPack is stable. So, yep, it was like in release candidate or beta before, and now it is stable. So it's now the default bundler for all new Next.js projects, and it's improved pretty like substantially. With TurboPack, you can expect 2 to 5 times faster production builds and up to 10 times faster fast refresh, which is like their hot reload. So they're making TurboPack the default, which is kind of cool. So if you do have a custom Webpack setup, you can pass the -- Webpack flag. But now TurboPack is the new default.
Nice. Let's see what else is good.
They've got some more DX improvements. If you use Create Next App, that's been redesigned. It's TypeScript first configuration, so that's good news. And then I think another notable thing is that the React compiler support is stable. So Next.js was one of the first to integrate the React compiler, and since in 19.2, the React compiler 1.0 is stable. So now Next.js 16 is integrating React compiler's 1.0 release, which makes it stable. And so that's pretty cool. So you can, that's not on by default, but you can turn it on with the React compiler true flag, and it's no longer under the experimental flag.
Sweet.
Yeah. I think there's quite a lot more stuff, but it's probably more relevant for Next.js developers. So you definitely want to just go read the blog post and see what applies to you. But there's a lot of cool stuff.
All right. Next up, we have React Native 0.82, a new era.
Yet another like re-architecture from the ground up type of deal. Do you know much about React Native? Because I admit that I am not an expert on React Native.
I feel like what I know about React Native is about the same as what I know about how car engines work. Like I have a very like abstract theoretical understanding of how car engines work. That's about how I view React Native. I have a very theoretical abstract understanding of how React Native works.
Yeah, so there's this thing that they're calling the new architecture, and as of 0.82, it's now the default architecture. So it was introduced in React Native 0.76, so it's been about a year, it looks like. So I think React Native developers probably know what it means, but I'm just learning about it for the first time. It basically looks like a ground-up rewrite of React Native. And the new Stack article that we are going to link to explains more about sort of what the big differences are. But I think the one that maybe you might be the most interested in, Eric, is this JSI. It's called the JavaScript interface. And the team said that the JSI is an interface that allows JavaScript to hold a reference to a C++ object and vice versa. So with a memory reference, you can directly invoke methods without serialization costs.
Yeah, this is cool.
That's pretty awesome. They've also revved Hermes. They're calling it Hermes V1, and this features improvements in the compiler and in the virtual machine that boosts Hermes performance. So that's pretty sweet, because I have heard rumblings that React Native performance is, it's obviously not as good as native. So this seems like a great move in the direction of native-like performance.
Yeah. What I understand is that, and I could be totally wrong, but my knowledge could be outdated, but what I understand is Hermes is a bytecode interpreter, and it goes and it compiles your JavaScript into this bytecode, and it runs it through its interpreter. So it's like doing the thing that Java was supposed to do, but with JavaScript. So that's my understanding. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, that can be a reason why it's not going to be as fast as like, fully JITted code from like Chrome or something. And I know they've been experimenting with something called static Hermes, which goes and drops it to like, it emits a native binary. instead of bytecode.
Yep. Well, it sounds like it's much better with Hermes v1 because they're saying that from initial tests and benchmarks, Hermes v1 outperforms current Hermes in various scenarios. We've seen improvements in bundle loading and time to interactive, but it said that the improvements do depend on the detail of your apps. So we'll link to both blog posts that sort of give you the overview and then the details. But that's pretty exciting in the React Native world.
In the blog post, they do mention the static Hermes thing. V1 does not yet contain this JavaScript to native compilation, otherwise known as static Hermes. So just want to be clear about that. This is still doing the normal bytecode interpretation.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay, now those are the 4 major things, but we also have a decent set of stuff coming out for Node.js because the LTS 22 got a new notable feature, and that would be native HTTP proxy support. Yeah, you're like doing a little dance over there. And I would agree. Because before you might be familiar with like the HTTP proxy global environment variable. So you would have to set that if you wanted to use a proxy that applied to all the Node.js global agents. But the thing is that if you created any kind of custom HTTP agent, like an agent per API, it wouldn't have that proxy info. So you'd have to do it yourself. But now you can specify proxy info per agent, or you can even inherit from the global agent by passing in the process.env. So that's pretty sweet. And then there's also a flag that introduces the proxy support too. So you can specify that at the command line or in node options or when you're writing shell scripts. So you can pass the proxy in there. You don't have to just rely on the global environment variable or work around it by introducing your own parameters and stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, this is just a huge like DX thing. Like this was just a paper cut that would cut you a lot.
Yep.
If you needed to use proxies.
Yeah,
maybe you don't live in this world.
A lot of corporate people do it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're in a corporate world, you might need to bounce through a proxy. So
for sure.
AshTypeScript announced to release 0.6.0. And if you'll remember, this is the type-safe Elixir TypeScript app thingy. So this is the Ash framework, and they have this AshTypeScript package. So they have a blog post here that we'll link in the show notes. And they have a lot of features here. If you're a big Elixir person using Ash, they have zero config TypeScript generation. So it automatically generates types from Ash resources, end-to-end type safety, because you got TypeScript on the front and Ash on the back. Smart field selection, a full type inference, RPC client generation, all of the goodies that you want from like a strongly typed situation. All the goodness of Elixir Ash coming back forward through the front end for you in TypeScript. So nice. Some cool stuff there. So check that out.
Sweet.
Some TypeScript news. We had a heroic update to DefinitelyTyped in preparation for TypeScript version 6, which is getting our mouth watering for the new version of TypeScript. But roughly speaking, this is a 1,839 file change to make all the packages work with ES module interop, which is a wild amount of work.
Wow.
So Andrew Branch deserves a gold star or 2. This is absolutely amazing.
The Medal of TypeScript honor.
Yeah, this is an incredible amount of effort.
Man, well, I wonder if there was some assistance there if we did it all by hand, which would be even more impressive.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I feel like you could maybe have made a tool to do this.
You could deterministically probably do it.
Yeah, right? I imagine when you have about 2,000, you might have done a tool. It looked like there was some necessary code changes in some spots. So it wasn't just a rip it and forget it.
Yep.
It looked like there was a need to do thinking in a lot of these spots as I go through this PR, which is a wild amount of effort, I think, just to go and validate that this is all correct. Just bonkers.
That's awesome. Super impressive. Let's end the news section with a PSA. There was a critical account takeover in the Better-Auth library. And we've actually covered Better-Auth before because it is a TypeScript first auth framework or auth library. It uses a plugin architecture to extend functionality, including an API keys plugin that allows applications to generate and manage API keys for authentication. Well, unfortunately, that plugin had a vulnerability where you could pass your own user ID to the generate key function, and it would use that user ID and it would just create the key for you. It wouldn't require authentication to generate. And so a malicious user could then create API keys and use those to take over accounts. So that is fixed, but if you are using that, you definitely want to make sure you upgrade immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully you got notified already through the typical means, but if you didn't, that's something to be aware of.
Real bummer because Better-Auth looks and feels pretty amazing. So
Yep.
I was bummed out to hear about this.
Yeah, I think what is kind of interesting is that the way that they detected it, this is from the Zero Path blog, but they're kind of like a sneak alternative, but they use AI assistants to do like business logic validation too, like static analysis. And so it can follow like the code paths and see how things flow. And so the way that it found this vulnerability was by seeing that you could submit a HTTP request with that body and then analyzing the code path for it and noticing that it creates the API key without any additional authentication. So it was kind of an interesting like case study in, this tool's way of detecting vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I think if we're looking at LLMs in the future of like static analysis tooling for security vulnerabilities, this could be really interesting because there's a number of like training data here where we know there are just bad patterns that we can train stuff on, and then it can go and find like, I don't know if they were using LM, they might have been using a more traditional ML technique, but
yeah, it's not super clear. They might be using an LM, I don't know, but they just say AI assisted. One thing that's kind of interesting too is that the way that they verify vulnerabilities is that they actually have other AIs take a look at it and try to run the vulnerability in like a code sandbox, which is pretty interesting. So it vets the actual vulnerabilities that get reported before they actually report it to the end package. Like before they actually report a vulnerability disclosure, they actually verify it to make sure that it is actually applicable.
Yeah, on the bad side of this, there's certainly like a ton of like bug bounty stuff going on right now where they're just, submitting bogus LLM generated vulnerability reports to people. So don't do that.
No, don't do that. And it does not sound like this vendor does that, so that's good. Good news. Cool. Should we move on to some community highlights?
Let's do it.
So we've got another PSA, but not in the same vein. Jake Archibald, who works at Firefox, and you might know from Shopify fame, has a PSA. Don't use top-level await right now in browsers because there's a big Safari bug where it just doesn't work, and it'll have to be re-architected in Safari itself to support top-level await. So if you are running in the browser and your users are using Safari, which probably many of them are on iOS, you don't want to be using top-level await. And some folks chimed in the comments. We're hoping to maybe address this at Interop 2026, which is that sort of browser vendor get-together where they talk about standards that they can adopt across browser runtimes. So hopefully, this might be addressed in the future, but I guess that's a good PSA.
Mm-hmm. The specifics here is that the module graph will fail if two modules import a third at the same time, which is a total bummer.
That is a big bummer. Moving on, Brian Munzenmeyer, who we featured a few times, his new talk from JSConf is now live. You don't need dependency. This is about the same thing that we talked about on the last episode, which is that modern Node.js features allow you to remove certain dependencies. You don't need these packages anymore, but now you can watch the talk on YouTube. So you can go check that out, and I bet it's pretty good.
Awesome. Brian Vaughn on Blue Sky has a small update to React Window to add some TypeScript compatibility fixes for React versions 18.0 through 18.2. Oh, check that out.
Yep. And React Windows for virtualization, which is super helpful. So I've used React Window in the past. I'm not using it currently, but this is really nice if you're using React 18.
Blue Sky user Polywolf, Wolf Girl Technology, has a blog post, 4 unconventional ways to cast in TypeScript. And you should read this blog post because they are 4 extremely unconventional way to cast types. And it's very interesting. The first one is the is operator, which is maybe the least surprising one. The rest are very surprising.
Oh, you can't spoil it.
No, I won't spoil it. You should definitely check it out because it's extremely interesting. This I learned some things here. This is wild stuff. Also, don't do these things. So, yeah, if you want to learn what not to do, go read that blog post. But this is a fantastic blog post by Wolf Girl.
Nice.
Matteo Colina on the technical steering committee for Node adds a blog post about how to do type-safe API clients and like has a whole workflow how to do it. One of the things that he shows off here that I think is like maybe interesting is you can generate an open API schema from curl commands and you can use that to go and build a type-safe client, which is pretty slick.
Nice. That is pretty cool. I've seen some tools that can take your open API schema definition and then generate TypeScript clients. So that's super nice.
Sweet.
All right. I came across another one from Free Code Camp, whose articles I usually enjoy, and this tutorial is a really good one. If you're kind of getting caught up in the MCP hype, but you're on TypeScript, this is a nice post that goes through how to build a to-do list MCP server, but also add auth, database, and billing to it. So I think this is pretty compelling because it's not just a toy MCP server. Like he actually integrates it with Supabase and then a auth provider called Kind, which is sort of like Auth0, but also includes like SaaS billing and user management. So that's pretty cool. So you can kind of see like how would I make an MCP server that collects payments and like actually does more things than just, boring things. So I think that's pretty cool. So that is written by Shola Jagedi. Next, this is super cool. This is by Guy Gao, otherwise known as Snowflight on GitHub, but I saw this post on Reddit, and it does not have as much upvotes as it deserves because this is a JS REPL with types, and my God, is it a beautiful, hot-looking REPL.
Ooh.
And you can just start typing in it, and it has auto-completion and the same sort of like Visual Studio Code style IntelliSense pop-ups and things like that. And you can also import any NPM package through ESImport syntax because it's powered by JS Deliver. And it also supports retrieving their type definitions if available, and the auto-completion will recognize them. So he's done a lot of work to make this super nice, but it's just at repl.js.org, which is, super handy. But I think I'm going to start using this from now on because sometimes you just want to write something in JavaScript, but you want types with it.
Dude, I just did import star as EX from Excalibur, and guess what I can do?
Yep.
It's so cool.
It is super cool. So this deserves some attention. So you should definitely go check this out. Okay. The other post I came across, remember when we talked about Ormed and Dangerous, our episode? We talked about something called Moose Stack, which is like an ORM for OLAP. And they just came out with another blog post on how to transform your transactional ORM into a type-safe OLAP data model. And so this goes into some utilities that they built that can take your transactional data model interfaces and types and transform them into an OLAP data model for ClickHouse. And they do it in a way that is ClickHouse compatible and doesn't sacrifice some of the good things that OLAP gives you. And I think this is a really nice sort of engineering blog post on how to create some cool type transformation. So you can go check that out if that sounds interesting to you.
I'm going to talk about this link real quick. This is the fast TypeScript analyzer. It's a little quick CLI that'll show you the complexity of your project. So it'll do like TypeScript static analysis. It's written in Rust, and it'll give you information about maintainability, like different complexity measures, this kind of thing. I don't know if you've used this kind of thing in the past for like cyclomatic complexity and that kind of stuff. They have that in here as well. So that might be something to check out.
Lovely. Should we end the community highlights on a funny joke?
We should. There's a really funny joke from Blue Sky user ed3d.net, and he says, paraphrasing, anyone who willingly writes bare JavaScript in 2025 is either works in Svelte or is a maniac, and you shouldn't trust them.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, we both have to cut it short today. There's not going to be a Minnesota long goodbye. It's going to be a Minnesota short goodbye because I got to go pick up my kids.
And I got to go to a meeting.
Oh, man. All right. Well, we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Kamran. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see the show notes, you can check your podcast player or go to typescript.fm, where you'll see a list of all the episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and please rate it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that's how the show grows and gets discovered by more people. If you want to suggest news or a project that should be covered, or just want to say hi, email us at feedback@typescript.fm. If you want to follow us on social, we're both active on Blue Sky. I'm at comronicus.com, and Eric is at ericonerheim.com. You can also follow the show directly at typescript.fm.